Okay, so the reality is that I like the big kids with like fullish vocabularies, you know, like that's my jam. That's where I tend to excel. So when I found you, I was like, oh, the small ones, yes. So what I've been thinking about in regards to smaller kids, when we have kids who have, like our kids, maybe they have a developmental disability that is even more so impeding their ability to communicate their needs or wants or whatever it is. But even with a typical toddler, a lot of it has to do with how we respond. And the traditional parenting model says, like, we got to nip this in the bud, right? Like, we got to make sure they know who's boss and then they won't, like, be screaming all the time. But we're also building skills in our kids that they can use later on. And that starts at that young age. I've never had kids that young, but I hear that that's what you're supposed to be doing. So say we have a parent or a caregiver that is at a store or something, and they have a kid that is having, they're impulsively touching something, or they're screaming really loudly for like seemingly no reason. What are things that we as caregivers can do to respond to better support like the long-term benefits for our kids?
Great question. And I'm so glad to be here today. I just want to say that first.
Thank you for coming.
Of course. No, I feel like finally it's like a face and a name and we did it. So first, I just want to draw attention to the word that you just used when you said that the child in the store was screaming for seemingly no reason. And that's a great word, seemingly, because it is for a reason. And so I think so much of the answer to your question is about our mindset as caregivers. And so even just shifting over to that, okay, I think they're screaming for no reason, but actually they are a person and they are screaming. And so for them, something is going on. And so if I were screaming in a store and I were distressed, how would I want someone to be with me? And the answer is not, like, we talked about this a million times, you better stop screaming. It's like, sweetie, what's going on? Or what can I do? Or this seems hard for you. Let's take a break. Or, anything supportive. I have so many things to say. I would say that's the two main things I would say. One is, before you can do that, kind of the number one most important thing is that you're staying calm and regulated yourself, which is easier said than done. But if your child is screaming in a store, the time that it takes you to just kind of plant your feet on the ground and take a deep breath is not going to totally alter the situation and is well worth it. And then the second thing I would say is that being supportive and being calm and being nurturing is not the same thing as not setting limits. Yes. And so you can, in your energy and in your approach, be warm and supportive, while also, if you need to, quickly whisking up your child and being like, oh, you know what, we're going to leave the store. Not, we're leaving because of the way you're acting and but just, we're done, whatever. We're done. Yeah. And that's up to the grown up. And a lot of times, especially recently, I've had conversations with clients where there's a real confusion between this idea of kind of positive, supportive parenting and letting your children run free with no limits. And that is confusing. Those are not synonymous at all.
Yeah, I find that a lot too. And it's, they have to have consequences because the real world has consequences. And I mean, to that I say, yes, it does, but it has logical consequences and it is just totally shaped differently. So if we say we have a kid that is doing something, we say, well, you don't have TV for 3 weeks. Nobody does that when you're an adult. And not that that's not like the worst response, I guess. Nobody spanks an adult. Nobody puts an adult in timeout, right? We use our tools that we have in our tool belt, and maybe the only tool we've been given is yelling thus far. So that's why parenting coaches are like useful. Like, so I didn't know I had to do a lot of research to know what I know now, right? But as the adults, we are expected to be able to regulate ourselves. And when we're teaching tiny people or people that are the same size as me, that are also children, to learn how to regulate themselves, we have to be regulated first. And that's the most difficult thing. When you said the thing about the store, what popped in my head is we have to see what it is about something happening in a store in public that like really lights our fire. Like maybe that's the thing that like really makes us mad because we're like, you're not going to make me look bad in front of everybody. Or Like, I came all the way out here to do this and I'm not going to leave in the middle of it or whatever it is, but that's on us, right? It's hard to be
Yeah.
the adults.
It's a one word answer. Yes, that is 100% on us. Absolutely. And that whole idea of what's going on for us, what were our expectations, what are our goals, what's our baggage. Because oftentimes we think that we are anxious or irritated because our child is making us look bad. But that's a circle, and it often starts the other way. It's like we're actually walking into the store already kind of high anxiety and disconnected from our child because we're on high alert. And that is actually what leads them to feel uncomfortable and then to get dysregulated. And so it really is such an interaction in these situations.
Yeah, and especially when we're talking about something like, so I primarily work with families who have kids who have fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, which is the leading cause of developmental disabilities affecting 5% of the population. And very often our kids don't have like great social skills. They can't read facial features, like facial expressions very well. There's like just that gap, but they're emotionally intuitive. Like they know something's up, right? And some of this has to do with like a trauma response in kids. Like a lot of our kids have experienced trauma and they just are like a lot more in tune with that. And it's, we try to convince ourselves that I haven't told them anything that's happening in the home. Like I haven't told them that grandma's getting surgery or whatever, but they know. And so it's easy to lose sight of how our feelings may be impacting them as well. So I like what you were saying about the setting limits, it's not a free for all. Like our goal in parenting is not that our kid, we're like, whatever you want, sweetie, and like nothing ever, right? So what would it look like for a small human for you to set boundaries for them? Could you give us like a scenario on something that would happen with a parent and then how you would set boundaries in a positive way?
Sure. I think there's a couple examples. One is when there's not a safety concern, right? Mm-hmm. So a child who's yelling and screaming for another cookie, or to watch another show or that sort of thing, but they're not doing anything that's unsafe. I think parents frequently feel like they have only two options. One is to give in, which they know they don't want to do. And the other is just to kind of toe the line and this very like, no, I said no, which doesn't get them anywhere. And the kid amps up. And I think there's a whole gray area in between those two things, which is about kind of empathizing with a child, recognizing that it's not about reason and logic, especially for a young human, but certainly it goes for older humans with developmental issues, and frankly all of us when we're in an emotional state, and we can say things like, I know, you of course you want another cookie. Who wouldn't want another cookie? They're delicious. Unfortunately we can't have one, or squeeze my hand to show me just how badly you want it because I want to just feel that with you. Oh, I wish I could say yes, but I can't, those sorts of playful interactions. When safety is involved, and that's frequently the case with young kids because they don't have the impulse control. And so they might be hitting or scratching or kicking or throwing, not because they're horrible people and they're not listening to you, but because they don't have the impulse control. And so in those cases, I think it's a very swift, I need to keep you safe. What you're doing isn't safe. We're done playing on the bookshelf, pick you up, bring you into another room, sit and hang out. So it's not angry. It's not attributing intention. But it is very clearly, that behavior with your brother is not safe right now. I'm not going to let you do that. Come on, we're going to go over here. And then you stay with your child when you go over here. You don't sort of say, I'm going to put you over here and leave you there to figure this out by yourself. Yeah. And I think that's key too. But those are, again, there's a million different variations, but those I think are two common ways that parents need to learn to set limits with their little ones.
No, I think those are great examples because I think especially in our head, we kind of picture that at some point our kids have gained co-regulation strategies and they should be able to do this on their own. But that age is not like 4 and under for sure. And so so I talk a lot about resetting. So it's not time out, like we're learning what our coping strategies are. And my understanding is from the younger kids, like my gigantic kids that I usually have in my home, like their reset is usually by themselves. Like they want to sit there and be by themselves. They don't want anybody next to them, right? But with younger kids, that can feel like rejection, like I did something bad and now like here I am in this other room. And so they may need you to like literally be there for like the connection piece, but also for the regulation piece. But you have to be calm for that. That's one of the tricks there.
Exactly. By the way, I'm sorry if my puppy's barking is getting in the way of this. I don't know if you can
I can't hear it.
Oh, good.
Nope, nope, not at all.
Didn't forget I said anything.
So yeah, so I think those are great examples of how to handle that. And so then at this tiny young age, there are arguments to be made even for older ages when we're looking at consequences for something. Like, okay, so every day the kid is doing something that's not safe. Kids with FASD have a hard time with cause and effect. This is like not a skill that is necessarily learned. It can be, but definitely not as easy as other kids. And so they're having the safety issue on a regular basis. So I hear a lot of times parents will say, well, I took away this, or, you know, like more of a long-term consequence. I feel like, but I don't know, at that young age, we're not retaining like, oh yeah, like 3 days ago I did that thing and that's why I still don't have my toy truck or whatever it is. Like these things are not connecting. So what is a good way to reinforce this thing that we've been working on a lot without losing sight of the fact that they can't remember what they did 3 days ago?
So there's so many things embedded within your question, but I think what I hear most is just this really old-fashioned reliance on behaviorism as kind of what motivates us. And I think there's no question that rewards and consequences do in part motivate child and adult behavior, but it's so much more than that. Mm-hmm. You know, and I often use the example, like if I lose my temper at my husband and he says, you know what, because you acted that way, I'm not going to cook you dinner for the next week. He's the cook in our house. Yeah. It's not going to make me less likely to lose my temper at him again. Right. Like I didn't lose my temper at him because I thought I could get away with it and he'd still, you know, cook me dinner.
Yeah, yeah.
I lost my temper because I just did, you know, I was tired. Yeah. I was stressed. I had no impulse control. I had no sense of cause and effect. And so I think we have to be really careful about thinking, is this consequence that we're doing, is if our goal is to sort of decrease a particular behavior, is there any connection? Yeah. You know, because a lot of times our kids aren't doing these behaviors because they think they can get away with it and still watch TV. They're just doing it because they're dysregulated or they have no impulse control or whatever. And so it's not going to prevent that behavior in the future. It's just going to make them feel more frustrated. And so then the question becomes, as you said, what do you do? And I think this is where we can really take a page from, you know, really good like preschool and elementary school programs where if there are limits and expectations, they're constantly being reinforced preemptively. There are signs on the wall. There are, you know, songs that are sung every day. There's a morning meeting. There's an afternoon meeting. If everybody's about to go into the hallway, you know, let's say to go to the bathroom, then before they leave their seats, who can volunteer to tell us what we need to do in the bathroom? We need to stay together. We need to use our inside voice. You know, you don't wait for someone to forget a rule that you mentioned 2 weeks ago and then get upset about it and give a consequence. And so I think when I work with families, if that's the issue, is your child is engaging in unsafe behaviors, what are the unsafe behaviors? Can you put a sign up? You know, can you just put a visual on, you know, if it's like, well, they're constantly climbing up on the counter. Well, then put a sign on the counter that has a little like no smoking sign with a picture of you climbing, you know, whatever. It's like they need something in that moment. And then they need some sort of reward, not necessarily tangible. It might even just be a smile or a thumbs up, but some acknowledgement that they did do the thing the way you wanted them to do. And that's going to be much more effective than any kind of consequence, whether it's long-term or short-term.
Yeah, that's so interesting. You say so. Positive reinforcement obviously is like the go-to with any age kids, and trust me, I got big kids, and they're still like, "Oh, you told me good job! Like I'm so excited." This is not something that speaks to me, but I have, and so it's inherently harder for me, but not for my husband. He's amazing at it. But the preempting it is a big key for parenting kids with FASD because we're almost waiting for them to fail. And when they do, we get upset about it instead of giving them all the tools to succeed. And even when they fail, remind them again, like, it's okay. So anyways, great. Okay, so you wrote a book called The Tantrum Survival Guide, which 2 of our followers got a copy of. I'm very excited to hear feedback. And you also do consulting. And yeah, what else? People should follow you for all of that, but anything else you want to add?
I sit on my floor and do these interviews. No.
Yeah. Yes.
It's a glamorous life. No, I do sort of more conventional, traditional therapy. I do parenting coaching. I do consults with families. I do talks for, I do speaking engagements. I write. I'm a Renaissance woman. No, I do sort of all those different things. My website is littlehousecalls.com. And yeah, and I'm here obviously on Instagram, and yeah, those are all the different things I do.
Well, thank you so much. I think all these talks always are good for parents to kind of get reminder or perspective on what's going on at home, because it can be so easy to forget that we're the adult. That's my big struggle. So it's good to hear from people kind of outside of our community. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I will send this to my profile.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Lovely to meet you. And hopefully we'll connect again soon.
Yes, let's do it.
All right. So long.